Welcome to Katie's Classroom, where I'm your host, Katie Leeds, and today I am talking all about Gene Key 63 and the gift of inquiry. And today's episode was inspired by a woman whose paths I keep crossing, and it hit me when I asked her for her information to put into my you're the 63 life's work. And I have a 17's life work, and so we're both working with logic, which probably makes sense why we don't disagree with each other. And as I was preparing my Katie's Teeny courses and Katie's Classroom, which you can head over and learn more about at owlprofessionalcoaching.com, the 63 key found me through nature. I am currently exploring the dream arc through the gene keys, and when a centipede, which I have a long history with of biting the apartments I've lived in, when one showed up at like 20 whatever foot ceilings that Dan had to rescue me from so that it wouldn't come down, when it showed up in the corner, of course I had to go look up, oh, what is that? And then the next day, I had a podcast but a meeting with the famous Emily Adams. I'm going to go ahead and name her because she's not a client. She's been on the podcast and she's got a business. So I'm sure she'd love for you to know her name. And it didn't hit me, of course, after all of that these things were sort of interrelated, if you will. The centipede represents the shadow, as Richard calls them in the Gene Keys system. We have the shadow, the gift, and the Siddhi. I think of the shadows as also being gifts. And the shadow that comes along with the centipede is the shadow of doubt, which is definitely the place where I have been in. It's in the ether, if you will. And the dilemma of this gene key is logic, which makes sense because logic will always talk itself into a circle. And logic will always seek itself. It's just seeking to end the doubt. And the reason that we call it the Siddhi of this truth is because truth can only come after completion. Your truth of whether or not something works for you is only revealed after you've experimented. You are, the study is one, and it was something that her and I have talked a bit about. And I like the way that Richard Rudd describes this key in the right book of the gene keys. The left brain is suspicious of the right brain. And the right brain looks at the left brain as though it's kind of, well, it's how women sometimes look at men, as they're actually a bit stupid with all their theories and questions and searching. At the shadow frequency, we're always divided. Yin serves yang instead of the other way around. Yin sees the big picture, the right brain's holistic, and yang sees the parts, the details, and how to take it all apart. One unifies and the other divides. It's like that joke about the perfect world. And when we come to this place of inquiry, creativity has to be here. And as I'm getting ready to launch my teeny course that I mentioned, the first episode of the teeny course, episode, if you will, classroom, is open-mindedness, and creativity is what I talk about there. And the first teeny course in Katie's Classroom is designed to expose you to some of these concepts and play a little bingo game with your own gene keys and human design chart, play a little breathing game with heart math. But most importantly, it's here to help you open up your mind. And I always think of Steve Jobs when I talk about this. He drops out of college, takes a calligraphy class. That's an open mind. This man is going to go on to be an Apple, whatever they do over there. And he takes a calligraphy class for no credit. Sometimes it takes an open mind just to learn something without having a reason to learn something. And if you join my book club, where we'll be doing some reviewing and studying of books together, Curious is the first book that I'm bringing to that book club, kind of all goes line. And curiosity is, interestingly enough, it's like a bell curve, where the more we know about something, the less we are curious to learn. And this is what specialization does for curiosity. I digress. I'm losing my way. And so this gift of inquiry that I wanted to talk about. I think how he talks about a true skeptic will be skeptical of themselves. Otherwise, they're just a cynic. And if you are a cynic, this is not the course of class for you. So keep it moving. And if you are skeptical, stay, because that's what this is for. Open-mindedness, you can be skeptical and open-minded. Cynical, we have found places where we are closed off. And when he talks about inquiry and how do we read out this insane mind of ours, the gift of inquiry is about, quote, keeping and using the energy of logic rather than becoming a victim of it. Ooh, I love the way he says that. Energy, the energy of logic. And because the 17 is in my mind for how I conceptualize things, and the 11, if you're familiar with the gift of 11 and the idealism, it's also very archetypy and not so logically. And what's interesting about where it shows up in my chart is it's something I can't see. It's in my Neptune. And it's this illusion, if you will. And clear to me, epiphanies always show up in these fun times when I get to interact with people, and then the insects or the birds visit. Like there's always some type of epiphany that seems to follow those. And the epiphany I had was my writing is much better expressed through the 11, and my speaking is much better expressed through the 17. My husband had just told me a few nights before that my writing's terrible, and that he needs to, and it's because I'm trying to write from a place of logic. And he's not wrong. I didn't disagree with him. That's the fun part about open minds, is you don't disagree, you just get curious about that. And also you don't defend because you don't have an opinion. An open mind is not looking for truth. Truth just gets revealed at the end, which is what the 63 is all about. And so he goes on to talk about how the energy of logic, using that rather than becoming a victim. Anytime we have an opinion, we're becoming a victim of logic. Anytime we have self-doubt, we're becoming a victim of logic. And I think that was probably what was on her mind. I can't speak for her. But based on the question she asked me and kind of where she's at, and even just the age that she is, I'm also having those, so I can absolutely be projecting here. It is kind of a time of doubt, isn't that what we do? Ether of this new year Gregorian calendar of what did I do last year that I don't want to do? What do I doubt that will work, so I'm going to let go of? And kind of victim of this energy of logic. We're seeking an absolute truth. We're seeking, if I just do this, I'll have that. It's how all seekers begin. The doubt sets you off on a journey to discover where it's coming from. In the beginning, it may not know that that's what it's doing. Some may use their logical mind to resolve a great problem. And as long as they stay open-minded, the journey of logic can continue, and the creativity will never dry up. That's an interesting one when I think of Einstein and his logic, the theory of relativity. How can you possibly dry up logic when you're playing in the land of quantum physics and believing that it's all relative, including time, space? Creative logic only dries up when it tries to fix itself as truth. There is no such thing as scientific truth. I like how he says, there you go, a bold statement from Mr. Red. When I read this today, I'm like, I've said that so many times, just so many people, in so many different ways. There is no such thing as scientific truth. I usually try to land it a little softer, I think, because it felt like an opinion. And yet, Einstein reminds us it is all relative. And George Costanza reminds us it's not a lie if you believe it, Jerry, which is important as well. Because it's true. Isn't that what you're here for? Seeking the truth? And that is part of how we find things. And so this is important. Oftentimes what we're really looking to do is can you just give me a salve of truth to take this away? I know I've joined things looking on my quest for truth, the Christians, the CrossFit, both at the same time, because there's an overlap there, just on a quest for truth. And it's like I forgot my roots as a historian. I have a degree in history in secondary education, and I know that history is just written by winners. It's all interpretation. and that every single one of my students was a city of one and would teach me what they needed to be able for me to teach them. There's some truth for you. It doesn't sound very scientific. My favorite part about science is that common sense and empirical data are not scientific. Think about that for a minute. Common sense, and the woman whose name I can't remember, I like to use as this example, is a scientist who discovered this symbiotic relationship that we have with germs and viruses and how we've evolved. And she was rejected for decades. But she was coming up in the 60s, and my mom got her degree and worked in a lab in microbiology. It was a 2-year technical program, but worked in microbiology, and she taught me growing up about the symbiotic relationship. We didn't over sanitize our hands. We did not I say we, but me, my mom and dad, we did not medicate by taking, some type of antibiotic unless it was absolutely necessary. And so my mom accepted this woman's thing much sooner than the community did. And the reason they finally did was because of resistance, bacteria becoming resistant to these antibiotics that we were developing, and realizing, we had this symbiotic relationship, i.e., like people with the Black Plague that didn't get sick and dying. Those people had a symbiotic relationship, and then their people went on to make more people, and people had a symbiotic relationship with that. And what's interesting is that common sense would say, well, that makes sense, and empirical data would say that makes sense, but the scientific community would say, well, there's no consensus, we haven't peer-reviewed. And so there really isn't anything as true of scientific truth, because the more you dig into science, the more there are no truths. And there's discovery, there's insight, there's never truth. We're all living in a big Nancy Drew novel, and all of us want to get to the end. When you get there, you'll be dead. So maybe you don't want to get there quite so quickly. Perhaps you'd like to play there and wake up every day and want to know what the mystery is going to look like at the end. Kids wake up every day when they're little and they're not concerned about what the end of the day will look like. Mom wakes up and she's thinking about, what about dinner? Inquiry has to remain open. It cannot be fixed. And when we think, this is how we know that the universe is intelligent, it's because everything is interconnected. If there were parts of it that were not connected, it could not be an intelligent system. Open AI potentially could be intelligent if it was fully open. But as soon as we close a system, it loses its intelligence. And what we've seen for logic is science has replaced religion. And so they're both stuck in the same type of, hey, we've got this book and we decide what goes in it and what doesn't go in it. Sound familiar? Both excluded women. Science is allowing the women to play. The Methodists, I'm pretty sure, letting women play. But for the most part, I guess science, women didn't get to play. And dogma exists in science. And it exists in religion. And the minute the mind becomes fixed on a finite system or structure, you are in dogma and you are in opinion. And what makes Emily so fascinating to have these, just to think about, this is her life's work, is she started out in an Amish community. She understands dogma. And it's funny enough, I didn't start out in the Christian community. I had to go look for the dogma, and then I could figure out how logic works. And I was surrounded by opinions. My dad had many books with opinions in them. All of his books, what you find out is all of them are esoteric and also religious, but most of them are telling us that that we're all interconnected, which brings us back to this idea of intelligence. The Fibonacci sequence alone shows us that there is intelligence to the universe. The earth is alive. Stars, everything, they die, so they must be alive. And when you understand that as above, so below, what happens above you impacts you here, your mind can open up to say, what the astrologist actually talking about? Tell me more. All of a sudden, you are curious. Inquiry, maybe if I were to name this gift, I would have called it the gift of curiosity. Because part of curiosity learning in this book is that you have to have just a little tiny mustard seed of curiosity in order to seek more. Just like you must have at least a mustard seed of doubt in order to seek. And clearly Emily had some doubt, which is why she left the Amish community. So if we looked at doubt as something that we don't want to make go away, but something that we want to get curious about, what does it want me to study today? What am I looking for? And also recognize two things can be true at the same time. Life is a paradox. There are polarities. We don't become so fixated on look at my shiny truth. That's the wisdom of the owl. Inquiry is about having the mind of a child. Again, why I would have named this one creativity. We're endlessly unraveling the street. Part of us is really only playing. Our right brain holds the balance. It believes that any answer we come up with can only ever be relative truth. Einstein. He also had the logic channels, which would be the two head channels on the outside, the 63 and the 64. And I had the 6124. Makes me the most logical one. That's a joke. I like how Richard calls this a magical perspective. It means we're no longer a victim of logic or thinking. We can sit in service of the whole. I think this is why when I think it was NASA or someone in the government, US government, did a big study on finding child geniuses, like how do we identify them so we can exploit them, as be my guess. And what they found is that they were all geniuses. That's because they only have a lot of logic other than, oh, let me keep trying this brick over and over. Like that's logic, doing something over and over and over and then getting a new result, or finding the different ways to get results. It's repetitive behavior, which is what logic is as well, which is how now it talks itself into a circle. But they're so open to inquiry. That's why they'll ask you why a lot. The moment our mind gets fixed on anything as external truth, we have the dilemma of trying to defend it. This is ultimately why people seek religion or science. They're looking for an ultimate truth. And if we can just feel comfortable in that ultimate truth, then we have certainty. And Katie's corporate classroom, which is a little bit different than the Katie's classroom, the teeny courses, is really there to help support us in moving through uncertainty, embracing uncertainty, mostly to stop looking for certainty and start being certain. You probably don't have to pay taxes and you will die. And even that, we could even chat about in a minute. Does consciousness die? Energy can be neither created nor destroyed, according to that Einstein guy. And I think other scientists also believe in that theory. And this is why we don't look for truth. When I listen to two educated people arguing, defending their truth, I hear the same thing. I see them both agreeing with each other. And they don't realize it. And it's maddening for me wanting to just make them see the truth. Yes, I also get caught up in this as well. I'm human. It's unravel the mystery. And just part of us is just playing and recognizing that we're playing. And we can hold that balance. We can hold 2-3 things to be true at the same time. We can hold that Trump is an arrogant leader and a humble leader, humble enough to just tell you exactly what he's going to do. Someone asked him the other day, about heaven. He said, "Oh, no, I'm not going there." That's a statement. And yet there's arrogance. And I like the way actually Richard Webb talks about arrogance and humility and how Judas could be the most humble among us. With his secret pact with God to fulfill the prophecy. We do not get Jesus without Judas. Jesus was on the cross. Look at me, I'm important. But that guy was arrogant because he wanted some shekels. Some food for thought. I'm not suggesting that's how it went down. But it is some good food for thought as we recognize that logic will always talk itself back into a circle. I have a beautiful blog I read on the gift of narcissism. Those people pleasers. That the impasse of the narcissist always go after. People pleasing is a form of narcissism. You believe people should like you, and you would like to control whether or not they would like you. I know I'm a recovering people pleaser. I am my narcissism. I also have the 10. I know South Node, so allegedly I've accomplished this before in another lifetime. But recognizing Don't need to have villains and victims. Is a not a thing. My brain is wired for stories and bias. That's always been an interesting one for me as well with the DEI and, really wanting to like unconscious bias and getting it out there. Like the brain is wired for bias. The goal is not to get rid of that. If you do, you will have to figure out what a door is every time you walk up to it. Because the brain is wired for bias. It sees a door and says, ah, yes, we push and we go in. And it says pull right across the door, but you push anyway because you have an expedience bias and you have an experience bias. You've entered doors before. You've already decided in your brain how this one works. And you have a distance bias. This is not your house door. You don't go to this door very often, or you know how it works. Yeah, first S is similarity. And the last one, which is the one where you see the cognitive dissonance, is safety bias. Your brain's going to cling to the truth rather than give it up and get freedom and, like suffering. And the truth is, people do love their suffering. My goodness, we do. We did probably come here for that, so we should love it, which is a very different conversation. But we're not open-minded. We become defenders, and we also, more importantly, become divisible. And when we are in this gift of this inquiry and open-minded and open-ended, we become indefensible and we become indivisible. That was that whole little pledge of allegiance I had to say growing up as a kid. So many of us become victims of the system, the mental organized thinking, and become serious and closed, which is how you know it's not intelligent. A two-party system, those are closed systems that cannot be intelligent. And it's very serious in the United States which side you're on. I suppose that's why the 17 dilemma is politics. And since I have a degree in history, I've played the dilemma. And depending on where I live is where people always decide what I am, which is fun. It's a 5-1. When I was in Chicago, I was the Democrat, of course. When I moved to the rural Quincy, Illinois, I was the Democrat, even though I was voting Libertarian. And then now that I live in the South, of course, I'm Republican. And so it's fun to see that. If we're not taking things seriously, it's fun to see that. In order to be indivisible, we can't take sides, and yet we still have to have a side. What to do? Open. That's my answer in the short, which is what the Katie's Teeny Classrooms Teeny course is about. It's what everything I have in my classrooms is about. Just come in with your open mind. I'm not here to convince you because I know that the world will not be fixed in my lifetime, and it's not my job to do so. So I'm open to whether or not you agree or disagree, and that's what's so important about being open. The right holds the vision. It knows that life is infinite. It's this holographic nature of reality. This is what actually frees logic to fly. Einstein is a very logical person, right? We're changing the world, one scientific principle at a time, and yet he understood that it was all, in fact, relative. Logic that isn't self-obsessed or self-serving is logic that opens the heart. Einstein also wasn't really an Einstein. His wife did a lot of his work. I just felt like you needed to know that. And so there was a little bit of self-obsession in there and self-servingness. And that is why we have to accept it all. I see people get so upset when these people have these like falls from graces, is everybody wants to put somebody on a pedestal. That's the truth, right? Whether it's Jesus on a pedestal, it's a Kardashian on a pedestal, Richard Rudd, we all want to go to someone. Katie's Classroom is truly about democracy and how we have discussion with many people. Like, let's have someone to facilitate the discussion. Let's have someone that can drop something in and allow us to all ripple and swim in it. And that's what I enjoy about going to many of Richard's teachings. But we can't be dogmatic. It's just an offering of an experiment. And this is a hard one for me to wrestle with. I assume that's why the centipede showed up, because I've been having some doubts about, do I have an opinion? Do I not have an opinion? Like, what do I do with opinions? not defending them is mostly what I need to be doing. It was my epiphany. The 17th gift is on a mission to create open-mindedness, which is my life's work. And today is about the 63 life work here that I initially started talking about, which is about inquiry. You have to be open-minded in order to inquire. And yet, if I have an opinion, certainly I will have doubt. And so either way, I'm still where I'm meant to be, which is another really hard one for people to grasp. Like this idea of truth and logic is to recognize that logic has no relationship to truth. I feel like I need to let that one soak in for a moment. Logic has no relationship to truth. They aren't of the same world or dimension. Now, my dad is always like, facts, Katie. You just have to agree on a set of facts. Oh, Dad, facts are just open to interpretation. He was like, we can't agree that this is today. I'm like, well, the calendar. And so, what to do? When logic sees its own futility, it's naturally transcended and will always defeat itself. The logical mind can only operate in a dualistic world. It requires space and time to lay out its patterns, so one day logic returns to its source. It is interesting that Einstein once said, imagination is more important than knowledge, more valuable, and it's a loose quote. And my mom always said, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. Logic, truth-telling is how the brain is wired. See how we come full circle? A few other things I want to share about the 63rd gift from this white book and the Gene Keys. The 63 has so much to offer the world, and it's constantly offering itself to the world. It makes life easier, more efficient, more organized. It creates technology that brings us together and frees us from hunger and all manner of problems. Science is wonderful and logic is so beautiful, but only in the right hands. Right. To deny me is to deny science. Not the right hands. Frequency logic is used to serve the whole. It serves the long-term big view. Its insights with knowing the right way. It's great to the world. This is what the gift of inquiry does. Whenever I think of that, I was thinking of the flip side of that, like a Byron Katie, where you ask yourself over and over and over, how do you know that's to be true? That's how you keep people on track. But inquiry can bring great healing when we're not asking to simply find the truth. As Mulder said, the truth is out there for those of you old enough and in the right part of the world to get that joke. They didn't have truth in that show. It was just out there. That's kind of the point. Like it reminds me of a Warren Buffett quote of, I don't need to know good news is going to happen whether I know about it or not. I need to know the bad news so I can do something about it. You need to do the truth. You need to know the truth. The truth will be the truth, whether you know it and find it in this lifetime or not. Perhaps you actually doubt. Ooh, you a shadow duty. This is why the whole systems that we study always make me laugh, because we should have just called them all gifts. Because that's what everything is supposed to be, as a gift, an experience. And Emily Adams, to bring this full circle, because that's what logic and this conversation are about, she has the channel of the 3536. That's what makes her a manifester. She is a 4-6. And when she steps into speaking from her heart and playing and taking life less seriously, she'll move mountains. She already does. She already has. And that doubt ultimately drove her to where she is today. And she is doing these things I just mentioned with the technology and bringing people together. It's how I had the conversation with her on Friday. He goes on to say, when the journey begins, the 63rd gift can be used to our advantage. It naturally drawn to systems of self-knowledge, to teachers who can guide the logical mind further into the great mystery. The 63rd gene key really represents the logical mind that likes to follow sequences and systems and need answers. Yet it's not about answers. It's about questions. It's about going deeply into the doubt and nature of our being. This is why I said at the beginning of the gene key, the journey of truth can only be lived. At a certain point, the gift of inquiry moves beyond the mind and into the heart. And the heart, too, is a great inquirer. What is love, asks our heart, and it asks over and over. Thus, open-mindedness engenders open-heartedness. And this is why Teeny Course number 2 in Katie's classroom is heart math. And Emily, if you get to tune into this, I'm going to send you this course for free. And it's going to be free for quite a while because I think it's important for people to have access to this teeny course. And heart math brings us into our heart. And it's going to shadow a lot of things as you about what you thought were truth. And as we create the coherence between our heart and our brain, we free up the mind. When the intellect serves the intuition, well, that doesn't get any more logical than that. Because the intuition isn't something you can nail down in truth. Science is still, well, heart math science says, hey, we've got some evidence to suggest that intuition is moving through space and time, and it already predicts the future. I have a whole lifetime to share of how that is true, even if I wasn't aware of it. Not being aware of your own intellect is always helpful. At this stage, the doubt is not really experienced as doubt anymore. It's more the question mark of our being. When we do experience self-doubt, it's simply allowed to move through, and it passes by us and is transformed. And that's what I've been trying to do when I'm sitting with doubt. As we head into 2026, do I want to take this retreat? Do I want to do that? I'm having doubts about, am I called? These are some of the real doubts that I've been grappling with. And then I accepted them. That's my favorite part of his art of contemplation is that, allow, accept, embrace. And as soon as I embraced, I allowed the doubt. I didn't like it. I really wanted to have the answer. And then as I sat there and embraced the doubt and said, I never get sick, and now I am having this I am with this and right now, and it was through me. I thought, well, this is a good time to not worry about that. And epiphanies galore. Here they are. They're showing up of that's the inquiry. It's just, I just asked, show me. It's my favorite thing to ask the universe. Hey, I'm going to put Pandora on. Tell me what I should do next with the song. And of course, you could suggest, logic is going to decide what that song means to you. But if you just let intuition do what intuition does, you will have epiphanies. You have spontaneous knowings, satori's, whatever you like to call that. And if you don't know what that is, you definitely need to come into Katie's classroom. You're experiencing it through heart math. Every client I take through that is going to experience some type of aha moment. I would say probably 7 times out of 10, it's an inner knowing. It's an intuitive hit. And the other times, it's the awareness of their nervous system. For the first time, it's an awareness, and it's overwhelming. And then we move through that too. Check out the white papers and the work that Heart Math is doing. And if you are looking for a therapist, or I cannot recommend having a Heart Math trained therapist enough. What I learned in the 12 hours I did in their trauma sensitive training, specifically designed for certification to therapists and medical professionals, that science, much of what I learned in the Activating the Heart of Teams that I am certified in. If you don't know that, if you don't know that information, therapists really can't help you in regards to finding your inner truth. And if you don't ever find your inner truth, then you'll keep going back, or you'll keep seeking. And that's ultimately what happens, right? People will seek many different types of therapists. Oh, I found what I really like, instead of finding themselves, which is the best kind of therapy there is. Finding yourself, never doubting yourself again. When I tell people that, they're like, they don't think that could be true. And part of it is because we platform people where it's not true for them. I've had in corporate world, a lot of that doubt looks like, well, I assume I'm just always going to have, nervousness before I speak on stage. I read an article yesterday, even still gets nervous. And then it had her tips, which her tips were really just about making herself feel big up here and others here so that she could feel less nervous. She had doubt that she was whatever, smart enough, good enough. And so I don't know, I'm not in her mind. But we can eliminate that very easily by bringing you back into coherence through breathing. And because you're the one doing the breathing, I'm just giving you some exercises, shine some lights over here and there. There's you become the scientific evidence of love and kind of have a little truth for yourself for those that are seeking it. So full circle, and I'm offering you a bit of truth. Where you breathe does impact what lights up in your brain, but you see, science is good for understanding and things, but not for seeking truth or finding it. And as you start to shift and also recognize that this is the alternative theory from Einstein, as you start to plant memories in your mind of feeling confident and doing really well, and watching your worst fear come true and watching yourself beautifully move through it, while also breathing, pausing. I do a lot of pausing in my visualizations with people. All of a sudden, oh, you don't have to be nervous. You don't have to doubt yourself. The imposter syndrome is literally what we're talking about, right? That could be truth, which is ultimately what Katie's classroom is about, is to help people bump into their individual truths. Oh, I came full circle with that truth. Now many people have it. Before we said, no, it doesn't exist except when you're dead. Truth is only realized after contemplation. And so if you've been contemplating, things going really well, that's the brain and doing these things, you will have a truth that arrives. That is a satori, an epiphany, an aha moment. Whether or not you decide to hold on to it and show it as your truth and, carry it around and be really proud of it, like joy inside out, that's up to you. Just a last reminder, logic has no relationship to truth. To wrap up with what he says, don't you just love that? It undermines itself before it's even begun. And he's saying that in reference to the Tao, Te Ching. And I'm a big fan of the Tao as well. Quote, the Tao that can be spoken of is not the true Tao. And that's, Don Miguel says in his work of like, don't believe anything I say or anything says or anything but say. And recognizing my tagline for my business is write your story, because it is a story. Everything we tell is story. And the 5-1 profile is one of those favorite stories where we have this projection field and people are always throwing things at us. No. I'm in snow globe. People are looking at me. I'm going to keep it clean. In the projection field, I'm just playing very serious, particularly about reputations. This is your invitation to play. That's really what Katie's Classroom is about. And every episode of Katie's Classroom has a theme song. And I had my epiphany today as I realized that FOMO was what was really why I wanted to join certain things at this time, because I knew in my bones it wasn't right for me, but I have a bit of FOMO about it. That was my doubt. And then my epiphany landed while sipping coffee, as it does. I am going to bring music to the Gene Keys, not in the very esoteric and also like almost too serious way, but in a playful way that invites you to create your own 64 Gene Keys playlist. And that will also be a fun Katie's Classroom adventure. Today I promoted myself, I promoted Emily, promoted the Gene Keys, talked about the 64. Most importantly, I promoted open-mindedness. Hope that you walk away today embracing doubt, getting excited when it shows up. Ooh, because when it's here, you're about to embark on a beautiful adventure. I can only imagine what it might have been like for Emily to doubt the Amish faith and community, what that experience would have been like. I'm sure you can tune in and hear some of it. I know I had her on my podcast. I didn't have the same questions I have today when I first had her on my podcast. Neither one of us had found this system. And yet here we are. I wonder what science and logic would have to say about that. Last thing I want to do with, I always pull cards before I shouldn't say always, I never always do anything. I have the 15. But I did pull two cards. The first one, I don't know why, but I said this one's important and I put it down and pulled it. My eyes were closed, I was shuffling. And then the other one I pulled, I said this is the one for my. And I like to use the wisdom of the owl. And this doesn't feel very logical or scientific, and yet, oh man, every single time, if you allow it to speak to you, it will. And so the first card I said is, I literally said to myself, it's important. I don't know why, but this card is important, and that's why I pulled it out. And it was reversed, King of Swords. And here's what it had to say. Having more knowledge than those around you does not mean that you have the right to control them. It is okay to lead with authority, but leaders must do this without being cruel and talking down to those around them. Just because one is more educated in the matter does not mean that they are better than anyone around them. It's a good reminder, and it is important, particularly when you're holding a lot of really important information that you feel like people need to know. Oh, that can be an opinion, that can be a truth that you hold on to. It's all relative. Whether you need to know anything in Katie's classroom or not is up to you. And then the next card I pulled, this one was upright, and it was the Knight of Wands. And here's what this one had to say. Take flight and follow your passion. You've put in the time to study your craft and are now prepared to make the first move. Put on your shiniest armor and be courageous. You will gain a lot of support by taking big and bold actions. Don't hold back. Give them everything you've got. So here I am giving you everything I've got. If you want to learn more, again, about Katie's tiny course or Katie's Classroom is a live virtual experience. And Katie's Tiny course is self-directed, and it's just a chance for you to get a little spark of knowledge in a few areas that I think are worth inquiring about. So bring your doubt, bring your brain, more importantly, bring your heart and be open.